friend, the nature boy, RIC Flair.
Yeah, shout out to RIC Flair.
I got some funny Flair stories that lead up to that main story. I was out on his boat in Lake Lanier. Oh, you're so exotic. You're so full body. And he was with his girl Wendy at the time. So
welcome to this episode of Chattin with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got the king of Connecticut, Matt Granahan. So I want to ask you a question about Phil Baroni. Phil Baroni was set up, or they were trying to set up a fight with Phil Baroni and John Gotti III. Can you explain some of that? Because I think people, they don't know the whole story. They hear bits and pieces.
Yeah, it was actually the Gotti III that wanted that fight when he first started fighting MMA. And he thought it would be a marquee fight because Phil's dad, Phil Sr., he was a Gold Star detective who started working with the Gambino family. He actually was one of the guys that testified in the Gotti Jr. trial. And there was so much family history there. And it was actually Junior that didn't want that fight, and for whatever reason, and a guy named Derek Panza got really nasty about Phil when this whole thing happened. When Phil got hung up with these charges in Mexico, he said the nastiest things about Phil. Angela actually came to me about it. Phil's wife, because Angela's his ex-wife. I did a couple videos with her. She's his ex-wife, but they're also very close. She started looking at Phil more like as a son than as a husband years ago with his CTE. And it was really Derek Panza that put the whole kibosh. And then Johnny A, he wanted to fight Junior. Did you see that? Did you see that press conference we did at the Showboat?
Yeah, he wanted to fight Junior. I knew that was never gonna happen.
Yeah, he's quite a character, Johnny A. I had him and Mike Dowd come down to Berman to do their podcast, and I was on his podcast, and then I got to thank him and I think her name's Kathy, because I needed a place to put the book I did with Stephen Bonner, the Chaotic Enlightenment book that we wrote together. I want to make it as an audio book after he died, and they gave me their platform, which was really nice. But a lot of people don't like Johnny A. I mean, I don't have anything. I don't hate him or have anything against him, man. I've hung out with him a bunch of times, and he goes back to Phil's dad and all of that whole situation. But he and Junior have this beef that's kind of like a soap opera, and a lot of the mob stuff became this weird in 2020. It started to become like a soap opera, and I had a sports show like back in 2016 with Brian Snow, the dude who called the Cubs games out in Chicago. We had a sports show, and we had I had a relative that was tight with Tony Knapp, who was Jimmy Knapp's son. Tony's dead now; he's passed, R.I.P. But he had some crazy stories. So I go to Brian Snow back then. This was like 2016. I said, "You want to have this mob guy on?" And nobody was interviewing mob guys, and he didn't want to be part of it. He said, "You can do it, but I don't want anything to do with any of that." And I interviewed him, and that was weird for back then, But he was talking about crazy stories going back in the day to Al Capone with his dad, and he had stories about how to take Frank Sinatra to the hospital when he got beat up by these Jewish gangsters that ran one particular casino. He was Tony was a casino man. His dad had him down there. And he was also a boxer, which made sense for us to have him on because he was a pro boxer under the Tony Rio name. But he's long past now. But then it just exploded. It became like a genre with shows like yours. And that's when I said to Larry, I want to interview him for Hannibal. And I interviewed Larry like 6 times. And we did a bunch of different interviews. Because I used to go.
I've
Larry,
interviewed him like 6 times probably.
yeah, Larry's got he's got a nice house about 90 miles, 80, 90 miles south of where I am here in Florida. And then I would go stay at his house, and he likes to tip him back and go and hang out. And then we started recording stuff, and then I brought him into the studio for the show that I hosted for Berman, because I told the Berman guys, I said, look, man, Valuetainment is in your same town. And we went over there because Berman has the real estate side too, and they would get in Valuetainment, their complex. And they were like, why do you want to have a mob guy on? I said, watch this. And I showed them all the views that Valuetainment was getting. And they had just had Larry on, and it had like 1 million views. And I said, man, get him on. And I said, I can interview him differently than, Patrick Bet-David's a great interview. But I said, man, he doesn't really know a lot of the stuff he's talking about. I said, I could interview him much differently. And we had him on, my co-host, Brittany, and that was one of our better episodes down there at the firm.
Yeah, asking him different questions, like other people aren't asking him them questions because they don't know.
Yeah, and what happens is a lot of times interviewers, they get on kind of like a moral high horse about stuff, and they also don't really know what to ask, and they don't really have a conversational interview, Yeah. So, yeah, Larry's a great dude, though, man. He's Larry also he's got the dojos here in Florida.
Yeah.
The guy that I coach for my Wednesday night class is for submission wrestling is a dojo that Larry's friend has, Phil Collins. I give him a shout out. He's a great guy, older kickboxer. A lot of people don't realize Larry was involved in kickboxing and martial arts quite a bit before and then after he did time.
I don't have any problem with Johnny A. Light. I just want to have a conversation with him, and it seems like he's avoiding it.
We probably got to pony up, right? You probably got. I think he wants, because I know everybody that's had to. He didn't. We didn't pay him because I knew Johnny, and he did it in our studio with Mike Dowd, and then I let him I had him raise it for him to use our studio for a few episodes. So when he came down, we didn't pay him anything, but I know usually him and Katie's her name, a nice lady that runs his media. They're always looking for people to pony up some cash, and that's the thing with the YouTube. I know I've been with Hannibal TV now for 7 years. I know how it works, that a lot of times what these guys want for money, it doesn't really translate, to what people make.
I've been doing this for a little over 2 years, and I have not paid $1 for not one.
Yeah, you're smart, man. I've never paid anybody. I do that old school shooter show, and I just have friends on that are fighters and stuff, and it does pretty well with Hannibal. And then Hannibal, I started working with him back in the day, and started booking MMA guys to come on his show. So I've never paid, but I don't understand some of these guys that pay. They must do it as a hobby, but they're losing money.
But they have the money to pay, so
yeah,
Yeah,
man. Yeah, it's weird, man. Like a lot of shows now, right? There's so many of them.
Yeah, it's getting saturated. So getting oversaturated a little bit.
I'll tell you what somebody needs to do is it'd be hard to do because they don't talk. But in Japan, when Pride was hot, and Pride was bigger than UFC, that was run by the Yakuza. I got guys that we've had on, old school shooters, that have talked a little bit about how that worked. Phil was one. I mean, they come in and they pay you extra to lose to the Japanese guys. But there's dudes over there that have lost fingers.
Lost fingers for what? Not wanting to lose?
Yeah, for not wanting to cooperate, not wanting to lose. The legendary Carl Gotch, that was one of the ones who was instrumental in starting MMA over there. I think he's missing. He was missing 2 fingers. He's dead now, but I think he was missing 2 fingers. A lot of the Yakuza dudes are missing fingers. I did a Yakuza episode with Jake Shannon. Jake Shannon did a lot of promotion with fighting and fighters from Japan. And I did one for Wage Channel. And even Jake was like, he goes, there's only so much I actually know because they don't talk. But if you could get an ex-Yakuza guy on, that would be huge.
It would be. I've done stories, Chinatown in Boston. I've been to Chinatown in New York. I met a bunch of people. I did a story about the Boston Massacre, where one of them Chinese gangsters went into the social club and killed everybody.
Yeah, like the old Valentine's Day. Yeah, it's Russian too. I mean, Russian, and then they work with Armenians. Myrtle Beach is, I mean, I won't tell the story, but I can tell some stories about an old wine business partner. One of my wine business partners is some of the businesses they had in Myrtle Beach with the Russians. I mean, there's a lot of rackets and cleaning of money that goes on because really, the Italian stuff has almost been overdone. There's just so many now. There are like recent stories like, tell me what happened. The Gambino guys, like 16 guys got busted last week. I saw that headline.
Yeah, 10 members in the U.S., 6 in Italy.
Yeah, I think they're being more quiet now. And, I have a relative that lives in Shaka in Sicily, and I was over there last year. And we used to go over there when I was younger. My mother's family's from there, and it's a different way. It's a different world over there. I think they still have a lot of the control because the Italian mob used to have a lot more connections with law and politics, and that's really what you need, to have real power.
Definitely. So one question I want to ask you, and we spoke about this earlier, Sammy the Bull Gravano. Back in the day, there was a rumor going around that Sammy the Bull was gay and having a gay relationship.
Oh yeah, Sammy the Butt Slammer. He
Sammy the Bottom Bull.
Yes, Sammy the Butt Pirate. He and this I talked to a couple people back home about this because I wanted to kind of verify the story because I had always heard this. But what happened was his gay lover, he had gotten a yoga studio, and he had this guy whacked out to shut him up. And according to what I was told last night, that's actually in court records that he taught when he ratted, and he ruined so many people's lives. I mean, to call him a scumbag is insulting to use condoms, man. I mean, he ruined so many people's lives. And then to see him now out there trying to act like a tough guy. I mean, he's like 5'4". He's a little weaselly guy. And, my uncle used to box at Gleason's and knew a lot of people. And he was telling me the stories about how Sammy used to go there and he sucked. He said he absolutely sucked as a boxer, but he would pay guys to let him beat him up. And I mean, that's just the kind of guy he was. And Dan Severn's got a funny story about Dan the Beast Severn for UFC and WWE. He was one of my closest friends. I had him on with Johnny and Mike Dowd, Johnny Alay and Mike Dowd in our studio. And he told a bit of the story, but there's a little more to the story that he didn't tell. But he got wrapped up in this thing where they were trying to do a real estate deal together. And a lot of people don't realize that after Sammy came out, he wasn't any kind of a Cosa Nostra mobster. But when he was dealing ecstasy, he tried to throw his own family under the bus, his own daughter and wife under the bus, because of the rat bastard he is, to keep himself out of the slammer. You would think that he might like it, in the slammer. You know, if he had Big Bubba there as a cellmate, you know, he might enjoy it. That might be a fun Saturday night for Sammy the Butt Slammer.
He pulled a gun on his own son.
Yeah, I don't understand. There's a young man who came down to hang out with Larry and I, who was a wealthy young man. He's from the Carolinas, and he came down and helped fund this event for Larry. And he was sitting there at the bar next to me, and the way he was talking about Sammy, it was like he was in love with him. He was a big fan of, and I told him what a piece of shit. He's like, oh no, you should really hang out with Sammy. You should go talk to Sammy. And he's got a lot of these people that cling on to him, which really, you know, it's kind of odd. I mean, it's kind of like the chicks who like slam on to murderers in prison, you know, and write them.
Yeah, there's the big girl, right, that writes the prisoner, and she's looking for I don't know what them guys have to offer. They have time, right? They give them time.
Yeah, no man. Holiday time. It reminds me of that movie. One of my favorite holiday movies, Christmas movies, is Reindeer Games. If you ever remember that one, man.
Yeah.
But a lot of dudes are like that, you know. I've been on Gunner's show a few times, and I think that's his wife. You know, she used to write him in prison.
Yeah.
You know, they fell in love. But I don't understand it, man. What do you think it is that a lot of these people have all this love for Sammy the Scumbag?
I don't know. I get a lot of it too. A lot of people say he's a great guy. If you look in his comment section, it's disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, it's really weird to me that he became the guy, because he's not a good broadcaster. And I say, Michael Franzese, I want to put over, man. He's a really good broadcaster. And one of my wine business partners is Edgar Vardanyan. He was the one who brought the first Armenian wine to the U.S. And he was partnered in the distributor I had in South Carolina for several years. And that dude is very, very sharp. And he reached out to Michael. He had a meeting with Michael's guys, his wine guys, because he's got the Franzese wine. And Michael's a guy that I like, and I enjoy listening to him and Chad's commentary, because he's actually a broadcaster. He's actually a well-spoken guy. But Sammy is just, now you know this stuff because you follow the mob stuff closely. Did Franzese rat out anybody?
Yeah.
He did. Tell me that, because I never knew, because I thought he did all his time.
No, so when he got arrested, he cooperated against people that weren't involved with organized crime. So he cooperated
that were involved?
That weren't. People that weren't involved. Well, they were involved with organized crime, but they weren't members of the mob. They weren't like, they were just like associated, like say a prosecutor or a corrupt police officer. He cooperated against people like that. He cooperated against another guy. I forget his name offhand, but he ended up passing away. And he says, I never cooperated against him, but there's paperwork that he did. I mean,
and did he get his sentence reduced? Because he did a good stretch, didn't he?
Yeah, he paid a bunch of money. I think he did like 10 years. I think it was around 10. But he paid a bunch of money. He was able to keep some money. I'll tell you right now how long he did.
Yeah, you know what's crazy, man? This will blow people's minds. Phil Baroni Sr. was able to keep his pension, and he was involved in murders. Yeah, right. Isn't that wonderful?
That's insane. They let him keep the pension?
Yeah, it's wild. Like I was talking to Mike Dowd about that when we were hanging out down in Boca. He was able to because I said how did Phil? He goes, yeah, and he knew it, and he knew that Phil was able to. It's kind of a notorious thing that he was able to keep his pension. He didn't really hardly do any time at all, and he was involved in murders. So I don't know if it was people that he knew, like within the system, because he was a high-ranking Gold Star detective, and Phil Senior didn't really get that involved until he retired. So, you know, when I say retired, you know, cops do 20, 25 years and they're retired. So he was still fairly young. He took an early retirement, but yeah, he kept his pension. He still has his pension.
That's crazy. So Franzese had claimed that at the height of his career, he generated $8 million per week in 1986. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison on conspiracy charges and released in 1989. Rearrested in 1991 for parole violation and ultimately released in 1994.
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, you know, it's funny because he comes off very well spoken, and his dad spent most of his life in prison. You know, Sonny.
Yeah. And then his other son ended up cooperating against him. John Franzese cooperated against Sonny towards the end of his life.
Yeah, it's terrible. There was so much infighting back then with the Columbus family too. You know, all the wars and all the infighting. And Michael was more just a money man. And now he's pretty successful from what Edgar's telling me with his wine company and distribution. Yeah. Edgar's been helping him pick up more distribution. But yeah, I mean, I tell people, you know, I'm a father, you know, I have a daughter in her 20s, and I always tell people you can make a lot of money more legitimately and people in legitimate business use shady tactics all the time that aren't necessarily illegal. You know, it's sad when you got family members that have to do time.
It's insane. A lot of different things going on like that. I mean, people will throw another person under the bus in a heartbeat to get themselves out of trouble, you know?
The biggest thing is don't tell people your business. You know, don't tell people what you're doing. And that's one of the things that the New York guys, being so flashy, they drew so much attention to themselves.
Matter of fact, there was a video today. I was watching it today, and it was there was a kid in a restaurant text messaging, right? He would go to this restaurant and be on the phone all the time. I guess it was bothering other customers. The guy who ran the restaurant was in the mafia, right? In the mob. So he goes up to the kid while he's on videotape, and he tells the kid, "I'm a Gambino. I'm in the mafia."
Oh,
like, come on. You shouldn't have to explain yourself to anyone.
Oh, God. What a dumbass. What a dumbass. Man, you know, Merlino, Joey had the restaurant down here, down in Boca, and he was a socialite down here. And it's crazy because did you see he's actually doing a podcast now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was nuts.
What do you think about? What are your thoughts on his podcast?
I haven't seen it, but I heard that he was doing one from Hollywood tour, and I want to watch it because everything he's saying is being closely watched, I'm sure. And
everything.
Does he just like the limelight like so much that his whole deal with the medical thing. I don't know if you know about that. With that cream that it was basically like he got caught up down here in that. It was actually a guy that I know that owns medical centers down here. One of the guys that worked for him that got caught up in that with him, and I think he might have even ratted on Joey. I don't know. That was a while back. But he's still involved, or I believe he's still involved with Philly. So it's crazy that he would be doing a podcast. It's nuts, man.
He has a lot of people out there, a lot of friends, you know, from Philly that this guy, he's well respected. All the people on the internet, they all respect him. And then there's other people who did cooperate who are attacking Joey Merlino, like Gene Barillo. I can't stand that guy.
Yeah, he looks he kind of looks like a woman or something. That guy's kind of a weird looking dude, you know.
He keeps saying all this stuff, what he's gonna do to me. So I mean, I told him, hey, we can meet up, we can make it happen. You know, I'm not worried about anybody.
He was with Johnny for a while, and yeah. I never met Gene, but I saw him. He was with Johnny for a while, and he's still a young guy. And unless you got scores of money, you know, don't draw attention to yourself. I mean, a lot of these guys are buffoons. I mean, it's almost more like Johnny Dangerously these days, or what was that one with Steve Martin? That movie, My Blue Heaven. You know, where these guys are drawing attention to themselves. Yeah, Captain Lou Albano and Danny DeVito, the mob comedy. It's almost like a comedy with some of these people, and it's usually the New York guys. But I was surprised about that with Merlino, because he's actually a pretty funny dude and a social dude, and was here in Florida. I don't know if he's still down in Boca or not, but he had a restaurant in Boca for quite a while.
He's still down there. He I believe he recorded his episodes on Wednesday. I think he records them on Wednesday. He has 9 episodes out already. Yeah,
I met him. There's an attorney with Berman back in the day that used to like to go to his when he had his restaurant, and he was keeping it pretty low key. So I don't know, but I was laughing because I watched some of your shows, and there's a guy that looks and sounds like Andrew Cuomo that has a podcast. Remember the governor of New York?
Yeah.
Andrew Cuomo. That's Sacali, dude. He looks just like Andrew. I thought it was Andrew Cuomo that was on there, because he looks just like him.
Listen, me and him are going at war.
Yeah.
War. Straight up war, man. I
so
invited him.
What was his deal? What is his background?
He was the captain in the Bonanno crime family. He cooperated against Vinny Bassiano and put him in prison for the rest of his life. And now he's out on the internet. And all I asked him is, come on here and have a conversation with me. He won't do it. He won't do it.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's just kind of odd that these guys are all doing these podcasts, and it becomes like a soap opera, like the fights, like back and forth, man. It's pretty funny, and it's all the rats. But that's why I was surprised that Merlino was now. And Merlino, does he talk about anything to do with the life, or does he?
Yeah, he talks about people who cooperated against him. He brung up Sacali. He brung up Barillo because they mentioned him.
They have to understand that law enforcement is always looking for the low-hanging fruit. And if you're out there doing a podcast, you don't say one thing, you're going to get pinched.
Yeah. Or the people that are watching that were involved with you are probably nervous, you know?
Yeah, he could. Yeah, I mean, he could inadvertently throw somebody under the bus that he was working with if he's going on there telling stories.
And not even realize it, maybe, you know?
Yeah. You know what you ought to do, man? And because you're in Connecticut, you know, there's a lot of Greeks that are involved in rackets in Connecticut. But Greeks are more like Italians used to be. They're a really tight unit.
Yeah, my friend Lucky the Greek. Shout out to Lucky the Greek.
Yeah, I mean, even going back to the early '90s, there were a lot of Greek bookies, and they had their own organization in Southern Connecticut, and of course Italians. But the Greeks, they were always pretty active. But the thing is, the Greeks, they keep it quiet, and I think that if you study history, right, me being Sicilian, having that background, you study the history of the real power that the mob had and how it originated. When they came to New Orleans, Louisiana, one of the victims of the largest lynching in American history, going back in the day, and the real power that guys like Lucky Luciano and Sam Giancana and Frank Costello, Santo Trafficante had. I mean, I'll tell you something mob-wise that I did a show at the firm that was really interesting about the Fertitta family and where they got their money. And I'll send that to you if you haven't seen it. It's really good. We had a guy on that did a book on that. And they used to run Galveston, Texas with the Macios. And they did it right. I mean, they ran everything in Galveston, and then they moved their casino to Vegas. And an interesting fact is that the Fertitta's father, Frank and Lorenzo's father, is actually a character that's depicted in loosely based on in the Casino movie Casino.
Yeah.
So that's a family that really did it right as far as like cleaning their money. Fertitta's dad only did a small bit, and passing that on to his sons. And that's really what, going back to Sicily and the origins of the name Mafia, like I was on a couple shows with, I'm sure you know George Anastasia, the writer, the mob writer. And
Merlino hates him. Merlino hates him, man. He did an episode last week about Anastasia.
You know what's funny, though? He was always close to Joey. He used to talk to Joey all the time. Like when I was on shows with him, like he was talking to Joey, and he was talking. I was talking to him about like the origins of the name, and he said, "Well, you have the most old school story." And the story that I was told when I was younger was about when the French occupied Sicily, and a woman was raped, and the local gang of Sicilians killed the guy, and they put his head on a stake. They rode through the town screaming, with a woman screaming "Mafia, Mafia," which means my daughter in Sicilian dialect. And that's like the old school fable. And I don't know if it's true or not, but the fable. But Sicily being an island. Yeah, I mean, that's really, if you talk to, I don't want to get deep into it, but if you talk to really old school guys from the life, I'm talking about like from my grandfather's generation and that generation, you'll hear that story, and there was a lot of nobility to it, right? And there was a lot of real power in government and in every aspect of government, to where it's kind of become so degenerated. And I said that to Larry. I said I blame that on the attitude of the New York guys that are so flashy. Like I love The Sopranos. It was a great show. It was loosely based like on the Cavalcanti family, but when you look at history, like when the first Godfather movie came out, they wouldn't say the word mafia, right, in that movie, and they had to get permission and all of that with Joe Colombo.
The whole film almost got stopped. The whole film almost got scrapped.
Yeah, man, it was one of the greatest movies, and that movie obviously, it glorifies it maybe unrealistically, but they have real power. And now I think the ones who have real power in the U.S. and I said this before, is as the Netanyahu and the Zionists. I mean, they control everything, every aspect of Western civilization. You can go out and have mass murders of people and for oil, because they have all that. They just discovered all that oil in Gaza. So at this point in my life, I always looked at like global power and who has the power, who has the money. And when you look at it that way, and then you kind of figure out, how can I get involved in that industry, those industries? I mean, that's, try to get my piece of the action, man.
Yeah. I mean, wars generate tons of money. People don't understand. They need weapons. They need clothing. They need medical supplies. They need all that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it generates a lot of money. Someone's getting rich off of that war.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, the whole deal, people don't understand. Like with the Ukraine, they want to get Ukraine in NATO because once they're in NATO, with their deal, they would have to dedicate a disproportionate amount of their GDP to buy weapons from U.S. arms manufacturers. It always comes down to money, and like in Israel, they created Hamas because they didn't want peace with the PLO. They wanted a more radical faction of Palestinians so they could keep the war machine going, because that's what generates the profit. The billions that we give to other countries, they come back to U.S. arms manufacturers, man. It's like General Smedley Butler said, 5-star general, war is a racket. That was his book.
So we give them the money, right? And then they pay for the weapons with our money? They buy it back from us?
It's ridiculous. We give the taxpayers money, and then they have to buy weapons from U.S. manufacturers. So it's to keep the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower famously spoke about and warned about years ago is like 100 times more than it ever was during his era. I mean, those are the people that are getting rich. Those are the true gangsters, the politicians, and the global leaders and their people, their crew, that's making all the big money. And I think it's with Cosa Nostra. I think in New York they kind of learned their lesson for the most part, and they're more quiet about it now. They don't put themselves out there as much as they used to. I mean, John Gotti, he wanted to be a movie star.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, the dude wanted to be a movie star. He's out there, Teflon Don, and man, it's like Richard Haas, who you should really have. Richard's got a lot of great stories about how the mob protected him with the studios, with the movie studios and stuff. But he's doing the play based loosely on Larry. He has me playing Larry with my buddy Sal Franciosa playing the guy that I'm reciting the story to in the play. And he's got a good grip on it and on the history. But with Larry's case, Larry was wrapped up with the feds, with the FBI. Scarpa Sr., he was doing a lot of work for the feds, finding out where bodies were buried, torturing people like he did with the Klan. And in exchange, he was able to do his business, and he was able to kill with because he had that sweetheart of a deal. I mean, that's really kind of the way to go, is to work with the government.
Whitey Bulger was telling on all his people that were against him. He was cooperating against everybody.
Oh, absolutely, man. And they kept that quiet. But the thing in the Colombo family with Scarpa was they knew that Scarpa was cooperating, but the fact that he was with the feds, they also knew that he could get away with doing a tons of shit, and he could get away with doing his business and not be bothered. And that's what I think happened with Phil Sr. I alluded to that, where he's able to keep his pension. The NYPD's always been corrupt, so a lot of times they'll know, what guys are doing and turn the other cheek if you're in turn working for them. And what Scarpa was doing wasn't ratting guys out. Scarpa was torturing people for the feds,
Yeah.
Yeah, now Scarpa, it's funny because I know Greg's son, Greg Scarpa Jr., really well. Actually, was a client of ours at the firm. We signed him for a case, and he's a guy that you would want to have on because he did time for when his sister was, and he killed the guy, killed the and
Some king. He wants
yeah,
some king,
yeah.
man. He wants a nice chunk too.
We got him some cheddar. We got him some scratch with his case. He had a case that I ran for him with the law firm with Berman. He put some money in his pocket, but yeah, man. Well, a lot of those guys get paid. A lot of those rats, those informants, get paid. And if they're making money and they can do their work on the street at the same time with impunity, I mean, really, man. I mean, that's kind of the way to go if you're going to be in that life,
What is your opinion? What's your personal opinion on people who cooperate?
Well, I mean, I don't
put your friends
like
to the side, people that you know who have cooperated. Just put all that to the side. What is your personal opinion on the whole subject?
I think they're scumbags personally, and I'm not saying that my friends are scumbags. I mean, I mentioned one other one when we were talking by name that cooperated. We were talking about Larry. I mean, I think if you think about it, you can understand why, because nobody wants to go to prison, but there's nothing worse than turning on your friends, turning on your family. Like I think Donnie Brasco, the real Donnie Brasco, trying to think of what his name is. He was doing, you could say that he was doing his job, but he was a real scumbag because he endeared himself to those guys. And I'm not a big fan of the way that law enforcement does that because, I can tell you this.
Joe Pistone.
Joe Pistone. I mean, I've been at houses with South Carolina, which is not a mob area. I've been in houses with cops where they've got tons of coke that they took from kids. And they're doing some themselves and they're giving it out to other dealers. That happens everywhere. So law enforcement, I think, is largely corrupt, right? So I think everybody that's in on both sides, with a few exceptions, are corrupt to a certain degree. But I really, I was not brought up to like rats. I mean, snitches get stitches. That's really one of the worst things that you can do or you can be is to turn on your friends, to save your own ass. And then, we talk about, I didn't know Franzese's deal. I never really knew until you said that. But really, with the exception of Merlino, and unless you can think of any other exceptions, all these guys that are talking.
Frank DiMatteo never cooperated against anyone.
Okay. Is he still out there or?
Yeah. I talked to him. He lives down in Florida.
Oh, cool. What was he out there?
He was in the Colombo family. He was around Crazy Joe Gallo when he was a young kid. And then he got transferred from there after Joey Colombo got killed, or Crazy Joe Gallo got killed. He got transferred to the Travagante family.
And he's out there telling stories.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of the people involved in his stories are gone now, so maybe he's able to. Yeah, he's able to do it. I know there's been a lot of talk about Gunner. Because Gunner was a criminal. He's a violent criminal. I don't know if he was ever in the mob or anything, but he never cooperated. He did a lot of time.
Some people have questions about his past and if he was really related to these people.
Yeah.
I don't know. People, I don't know. He says it quite a bit. I mean, do you think there's ever a reason for someone to cooperate?
I think in Larry's case, I think if you're cooperating, or even like you said in Franzese's case, if you're cooperating against corrupt law enforcement, that's a different story. You know, because those guys are sworn to do something different. I don't have anything against anyone who would cooperate against or expose corrupt law enforcement.
Yeah. Yeah, because they shouldn't be operating at any capacity if they're not following the law, right?
And so many of them aren't. I mean, I mean, back in the day, you know, a lot of the bodyguards for guys were cops, and that dirty work that they did were cops. I mean, not only in mob states. I mean, you have that situation in the South, which is a whole nother thing. You start bringing some Southern boys on. You know, there's a lot of deals where they're stealing from low-level guys and giving the product to people that they worked for, and that there are a lot of there's a whole epidemic throughout the South of cops that are dealing. You know, that, and there've been, and some of them get caught, but a lot of times they don't. You know, there's a lot of corruption with the good old boys in the deep South. I live in South Carolina.
They bring you somewhere out there in the woods, man.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, damn, I was just, I mean, a guy that I stretched there at the wrestling show, Bill Hazelwood. He's got a lot of stories about West Virginia, up in them hills, man. But I can tell you, in South Carolina, I saw it myself with guys that I trained with and partied with that were cops that were corrupt as hell. And it goes back to what Phil Sr. said. You know, Phil Broyne Sr. said, if you want to be a gangster, it's best to have a badge, because they can get away with a lot more shit. And there are a lot of corrupt, I don't want to say, you know, there's a lot of good cops out there, but there's a lot of corrupt police departments, especially throughout the South. And that's a whole other deal, because it's not Italian mob. It's a good old boy network.
Yeah, I think a lot of these Connecticut law enforcement agencies are corrupt. A lot of them, New Haven, East Haven, Groton, all these places. They
Stanford used to be corrupt as hell back in the day.
Stanford.
Yeah, I don't know if you followed what happened with Beamer's, with the strip club in Stanford, but that involved.
I've heard the name.
It was called Beamer's. It was a strip club in Stanford. It might be under new management now, but there were they tried to pin it on being a mob thing when they were being shaken down, but it was really corrupt law. Stanford police was always corrupt. I mean, I'm going back to the 90s now, but they were always corrupt. And it was one of those deals where they tried to pin that on being a mob thing, and there may have been some mob figures involved, but it was mostly cops. And in New Haven, I mean, New Haven's been corrupt for a long time with
cops
mob,
telling on themselves. Cops telling on themselves.
And cops working for clubs that are cleaning money. You know, I mean, I go back to the George Floyd thing. Like, George Floyd and that cop, they both were doing security at the same club. So there's probably a lot more to that than people will ever know. And everybody got hung up more on it being a race thing, but they didn't look into that. There could have been a lot more to it. There are no coincidences.
There was a lot more to it. I went out to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I stayed out there for about 6 months. I interviewed the guy who videotaped George Floyd getting killed. I interviewed people on the street. I talked to them about the situation, and they said that George Floyd and that police officer had a lot of interactions. People in the neighborhood said that people were getting pulled over all the time and harassed by them cops. And this isn't the first time this type of stuff has happened with them.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a ton of racist cops, especially, you know, in the South. But I think with the George Floyd thing, as soon as you heard that they were both doing security for the same club, that should put a red flag up, and nobody really ever investigated that.
Yeah, it's really, really wild that people overlook that small detail in the story, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I wanted to ask you. I saw you were with Big Pussy, Vincent Pastore, one of my favorite actors.
Yeah, shout out to Big Pussy.
Yes.
I was at his birthday last year at the casino, and
I saw you singing with him.
no, I wasn't singing. I was videotaping him.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He was singing up on the stage.
Yeah, he's a great character, man. Great character actor. And, you know, that's a whole nother genre. The mob. What are your favorite mob movies?
I like Goodfellas, one of my favorites. That movie, the Gotti movie, the '96 Gotti. That was a great movie.
The HBO one. Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah. Boardwalk Empire, really good.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite characters was on that Boardwalk Empire, man. And I'm trying to think of his name. The Sicilian guy. He was kind of goofy, like, a little goofy. What the hell was his name on that show? I had been years since I watched that show. I used to watch that show.
I think I know what you're talking. The guy with the eye and shit.
Yeah,
like
the guy.
Fake eye, right? He had like a fake face, piece of his face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on the tip of my tongue, but it's not gonna come out. Roselli. It was almost like Johnny Roselli. Something Roselli. He was funny. He was kind of like, was having issues, like home issue. He was just a funny dude, man. He was a deep character.
Jimmy wasn't Jimmy. It was
He had like a funny first. It was like not a regular first. It was like a nickname first name.
Nelson? Was it Nelson?
Wow, it was man. I'd have to go back. I'd have to Google the
Jip Rossetti. Jip Rossetti.
Jeep. Yeah. He was fun. Yeah, he was a great character, man.
Oh man, when he set that cop on fire, right?
Yes. Yeah, I remember that was a good show.
Yeah.
Did you watch Stallone
no,
Tulsa King?
I did not see it yet. No.
That first season of Tulsa King, I got into it. It was very unrealistic, especially in the beginning, but it had a good plot to it, man. It was a good and Sly, man. He only played a gangster once before, I think, in that comedy where he played a mom don and somebody was dating his wife, but he never really did a lot of gangster roles. He played a good gangster in that movie.
He had people advising him on how to act and what to say, the mannerisms. He had people advising him on that.
If you go back to the first Rocky movie that he wrote, he was a collector in the beginning of that movie. If you remember,
Jack O'Halloran, I just had him on. He was in Superman. He said that he was advisor for the Rocky movie.
Oh, nice.
Stallone came to him and spent some time with him because he was a professional boxer. His father was Albert Anastasia. He was involved with a lot of people. Close ties with Raymond Patriarca, and I guess Rocky spent some time with him for Sylvester Stallone, and he was learning mannerisms and things from him.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, did you ever have actor on that just passed away from The Sopranos? The dude with the white hair all around and black on top.
Frank Vincent.
Yeah, not Frank
Frank
Vincent, the other one. The one that he had a lot of past in the streets. He had the man, I can't believe I can't remember his name. The white hair all around, but the black on top. You know what? He just died.
Yeah, Paul. He played Paul. Oh, Paulie, the guy who
Paulie
played Paul.
Walnuts. Yeah,
Yeah,
Paulie
yeah.
Walnuts. Did
No,
you
I
ever
never
get a
had
chance
him
to-
on. No, I wanted to, man.
I watched his interview one time, and he had some stories. He was a street guy, before he got involved in acting.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
killed a guy, I think, back in the day.
yeah. He did some prison time before he got into acting, and that's good. I mean, that helped him a lot for the role. Yeah, I think he had like a manslaughter rap or something beforehand. But yeah, man, I mean, we're talking about all this mob stuff, but originally you wanted me to introduce you to my good friend, my great friend, the nature boy, Ric Flair.
Yeah, shout out to Ric Flair.
Yeah, and it's been almost 2 years ago now, going on 2 years ago. I knew Rick. He used to have his boat at Dockside, South Carolina, Lake Murray. That was when he was with this snotty chick, Tiffany, at the time. And I coached his son Reed a little bit, and I got to know Rick, the late Reed Flair, who overdosed. And I got some funny Flair stories that lead up to that main story. I was out on his boat in Lake Lanier, and I was with this chick, Gloria. That was pretty hot, and he was all over. He's famous for that. He was like, "Oh, you're so exotic. You're so full body." And he was with his girl Wendy at the time. So I started sending him some naughty pics and videos, and then they want to have him on the podcast at Berman. So they put me in touch with Wendy, his wife. And Rick is asking me for more pictures. So I had some good naughty video clips I sent him. And he called me frantically one day, and he's like, "Matt, those videos you sent, they're from your other friend, right? They weren't for me." And I said, "What? No, I was with somebody. I was doing something." And he goes, "Matt, you need to call me." So I forgot, and then he calls me that night, and he's pissed. And then he sends me these texts that those girls you send me those videos of, they don't stack up to my Wendy. So obviously she had seen them, and then they broke up not long after that. So I hit Wendy up, and she wanted me to come out to Rosemary, where they live, which is on the other side of Florida. And she sent my messages to Rick, and he exploded. Said he was going to hunt me down and kill me. "I'm going to find out where you live. You're dead." And made a big story about it on the Hannibal TV. And I say, Rick, I stole Wendy, but I gave her back to you because she was 2 cup sizes too small and 40 years too old for this king. Woo!